Today we're going to make our sugar cookies. So we're going to start off with very softened room temperature butter, as well as our brown sugar and our granulated sugar. So we're going to be making this using something called the creaming method. So the creaming method is when we combine our fat, which is our butter, along with our sugar, which is our sweetener, our flavorer. And we're going to combine this in a bowl until it becomes a nicely soft and fluffy product. Now, if you have a mixer, you of course can use a hand mixer or a KitchenAid, which is also known as a stand mixer. You can use those items in order to make your cookies. But we always like to make sure that we show you how to use the basic tools, which starts with your hands. So this involves a wooden spoon and a bowl. So the reason why I'm using a wooden spoon as opposed to a rubber spatula is because my wooden spoon is going to allow me to really work with the butter here and really apply pressure without it breaking. If I did this with a rubber spatula, there's a chance that it might break. And once it starts to come together, it'll start to become nice and fluffy. So what's happening in this process is that the sugar is actually dissolving in the butter. There we go. And it is actually also trapping air. Next stage is it's going to actually be almost paste-like. So we want to go past this stage and we want to get it to a light and fluffy stage. The other thing that I want to look for is if I have any lumps of brown sugar. Brown sugar tends to dry up very quickly on us or harden quickly. If I see any lumps of brown sugar, I want to make sure that I specifically target those areas to kind of mix them in. So I don't know if you can tell, but it is getting a lot lighter in color, and that's because air is being incorporated. So my next step is now to incorporate my eggs. So if I was making a larger batter and I had more than one egg, I would add in my eggs one at a time. But in this scenario, I have one egg, so I'm going to add in just one egg at a time, the whole egg, and then I also put some vanilla in here as well. So I'm going to break up that yolk. So right now I'm mixing together a liquid with a fat, and as we know, water and oil or water and a fat don't like to mix. So when you first go to mix this, it's going to create a really big mess. It's going to look like a disaster here, but we're going to keep on mixing it and emulsifying it. So stick with that wooden spoon. Make sure that your egg is at the same temperature as your butter. If I go and I add a cold egg into this mixture, it's actually going to curdle and separate from it. So I want to make sure that everything's at the same temperature. So now once this is completely mixed in, I'm actually going to switch over to my rubber spatula. My next set of ingredients to add in are my flour, baking soda, and salt. I'm going to thoroughly mix these in to incorporate them into the recipe. My final step is going to be to incorporate my flour into my butter mixture. So I'm going to put all that in there, and now I'm going to start to stir. Very carefully, I'm going to stir it in so it doesn't make a mess. And as this comes together, once it gets to the point of absorbing all the flour, then I'll be done with my mixing. I want to make sure that I don't overmix at this point, because the more I mix, the more I develop the gluten or the protein strands in the flour. And we don't want that to happen. This is actually a pretty soft dough when it is finished, so you want to make sure that you work with it nice and gently. Okay, just make sure you look through the batter, look towards the bottom, and make sure that you don't see any unmixed flour. Okay, and and that is our sugar cookie dough. Okay, so the last part of what we are doing here is we are scooping our cookies. So we are going to use a portion scooper or an ice cream scooper. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna dip our scoop into the mixture, wipe it up on the side of the bowl so we have a nice flat scoop. And then we're gonna go ahead and set up our baking pan. If you notice, I am spreading my cookies out and creating a space, because what will happen is that when it bakes, it needs to have air circulation and it needs to have space to spread out. What I want to show you here is that we have a couple of options for our toppings. So we can simply roll this in plain sugar, we can roll this in cinnamon sugar. We also have here some different options, so just slightly flatten it. So we have a couple of sprinkles we can put on, right? We have a couple of M&Ms that we can place on our cookies. We also have some jelly. So if I wanted to make a thumbprint cookie, I would actually put these, the cookie dough in the refrigerator a little bit to firm up, but once it's firmer, I can push it down with my thumb. And then in that space there, I can take whatever my favorite jellies are, and I can simply put some of the jelly there, right? So again, I can keep it plain. I can also roll it in sugar, or I can always put one of my favorite things, which is M&Ms, or I can also put on some sprinkles. I want to make sure that my cookie dough is chilled before I bake it. If it's a warm room temperature cookie dough, it's going to just spread out really quickly and become too flat. So if I bake off something that's a little cooler or chilled, it'll hold a nice shape and give me a nice thickness in the center and properly spread out. So our cookies are actually going to, when they bake, really probably go about a ½ inch bigger than what they are right now.
Here are our cookies spread out on our sheet pan that is lined with parchment paper so that they don't stick and that they're easier to transfer off the pan when they come out of the oven. I'm gonna put them in my 350-degree oven for about 7 minutes. Then I'm gonna rotate them and then give them another 5 minutes. The temperature is 350 degrees and they are in the center of the oven. So it's been about 7 minutes. I'm going to check my cookies. I'm gonna rotate them and I'm gonna cook them for 5 more minutes and I'll be back. Cookies are done, but I want to get them off this hot baking sheet, so I use the parchment paper to slide them off and give them time to cool before we eat them. Enjoy.